Hi, and welcome to a brand new episode of our podcast, Change Setters, the podcast where we explore the ever evolving landscape of change management with experienced practitioners. And today we have Margit Takash. You have actually seen her before if you've been following me for a while on this podcast journey. So thanks again, Margit, for coming back.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me along again.
It's a pleasure. We had quite good conversations as we were preparing for our first podcast together a few months ago. And we were like, but this topic on culture, which we'll get to, is so cool. We have so much to talk about. So we're like, okay, let's schedule a second podcast together. And so here we are. So a bit of an explanation of who Margaret is in case you haven't met her yet. So she's a fantastic change practitioner. She has been doing and helping companies with their change management initiatives for a very long time already. And she has recently launched her book called Change Matters. Now it's absolutely live, and I'll make sure to link all the links in the description boxes. And so she explains through narrative and storytelling how to do change management, and she invites change leaders to reflect on wisdom and how to tackle different challenges in the workplace. So well done, Margaret, for this
Thank
successful book
you.
launch.
Thank you.
And she's based in Geneva in Switzerland. So in case you guys wanted to reach out to her, but I'll leave her website in the description box. So let's get to know Margaret a little bit before we go deep into the topic of today. Margaret, any role model that you have and why?
Well, a few months ago when we talked, I mentioned to you that I'm actually quite inspired by David Copperfield, and I told you all the reasons behind it. Um, if I was to share with you a new name, it would be today, I would say Michelle Obama. Something that really inspires me in her, other than being a very charismatic woman, is what she has been advocating with her actions and also in her book Becoming. There was a statement that she said, which is, when they go low, we go high. And it's a very memorable line to me because it's all about maintaining a positive and dignified approach in the face of adversities. And when we are facilitating change, there are always naysayers who kind
Yeah.
of try to bring us down. But just remembering her sentence, when they go low, we go high, it just encourages us to see the positive side, and we need to rise above those signs of resistance. I really love that she advocates for education, for equality, and
Yeah.
there's just a human touch around how we can lead change in different parts of the world to have a better future for more people.
She is an inspiring lady, Michelle Obama, for sure. I'm calling her Michelle like she's a friend.
Many
Would
of
love to
us
meet
do.
you, Michelle Obama. Thanks, Margaret. And the second question would be, do you have a project that you're particularly proud of that you would like to share with the audience?
Last time I mentioned to you that launching my first book, Change Matters, was a massive initiative, and I was really, really proud. I am still very proud of having reached over 700 people with it so far. As being the first time author, these steps are just really fascinating and also encouraging. But let me share with you about a project that I have been working on recently. It was with a multinational company in the sportswear industry, and I was involved in a global initiative. I had to help them come up with a roadmap for change for their lean ambassadors. So think about the experts in the continuous improvement world. I designed and delivered change workshops. I delivered trainings. I prepared these selected people to do coaching around the world in different regions, different countries, but really at shop floor level. And I even had the opportunity to coach some of them so that those trainings and workshops are not just nice to know, but they actually brought it back to real life. It was a collaboration for a year and a half, and I
Wow.
saw some really outstanding change leadership. in this company. And it just proved to me that if you have the right active and executive sponsors in place, you can really drive a change. Now, what really warms my heart is even after my involvement of 1.5 years, I'm in touch with them and I see how they multiply the effect in the regions, and I'm delighted to see their success stories. And I'm not talking about fancy case studies, but when from different distribution centers they say, this is what we've achieved and this is how I got people on board, because ultimately that's what really inspires us as change practitioners, right, Karen?
100%, 100%. And hearing multinational, I cannot not think about the theme of today. You know, I'm sure that you had to adapt your change plan and your change roadmap according to the different cultures you were going to reach out to.
Exactly.
Right?
It's interesting because in these MNC, there was a global agenda. But for example, when we worked with people from the Greater China area, we had to soften certain ways of argumentations. Europeans in general like to challenge things until they feel it's their own. It takes a little time to really get people on board. In Asia, respectfully, they say yes to it, but they don't necessarily do it. And I think, again, because of a really strong sponsor, we had the global roadmap, but when it came to managing it, I was working with the global team project managers, and I also worked with some of the Greater China people to see how to understand what holds them back, and not just in the face value saying yes, 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 and doing nothing, but how really get actions as well. And I think that beautifully fits into managing the chaos in the cultural landscape that is focused for today, because let's be honest, we can have all the best intentions, but if we don't understand, respect, and appreciate those differences, it's gonna take much longer to get people on board for any transformational initiatives we have.
100%, 100%. Transitions so beautifully into the topic of today. So Margaret and I, when we were discussing about the topic of culture, we both realized that we have both traveled an immense amount, and we've also worked with different cultures in different countries as well. And so we started thinking and talking about, you know, how you kind of need to make sure that you adapt your strategy, your voice, your argumentation, like you said so well, depending on who you're talking to. So we would like to explore a use case. So I've had a challenging customer once. Sorry, something appeared here on my screen. I had a challenging Israeli customer. I've actually had two, but we're going to use one use case here today. And so we're going to go through sort of the culture map done by Erin Meyer, which is fantastic, and kind of think about what I could have done better and what I could have improved in my change management roadmap with this particular use case. But before we dive into that, just wanted to give you an overview of what we're doing, and it's going to be really like a chit chat. And Margaret's going to be, you know, coaching me as well, which I find is really cool. But before we go into that, Margaret, could you share a little bit more about Erin Meyer's culture roadmap or culture map, and explain to the audience a little bit what it means?
Absolutely. So foremost, I'd like to just talk about what kind of intelligence exists out there. There is like the cognitive intelligence, knowing our way around the cognitive world. Then there is emotional intelligence, which is being able to recognize our own emotions, manage them, and recognize it in others, and again, manage stakeholders really well. Without being exhaustive in terms of the types of intelligences that exist, there is also cultural intelligence. And you and I, having a quite multicultural background, we are very passionate about this. When I think about cultural intelligence, I would like to say, yes, I'm quite culturally intelligent, but I want to put forward a little bit of a question to everyone in the audience to think about how culturally intelligent they are, because I'm sure they already have a really good level. Now, I would say it has 4 levels. One is being aware of the differences. having the desire to want to figure out why in other cultures people behave and act in a different way, having the knowledge on how to comprehend those differences, and then have a strategy, just do the action so that we can find a better balance. I think that when it comes to cultural intelligence, we normally are aware, like we just get agitated if there is a difference. We might even have a desire, I want to get along with these colleagues in Israel or in other parts of the world. And when it comes to the third step, which is the knowledge, that's where I encourage people, anyone, to look at what context, what schemes, methodologies we can rely on. You and I talked about Erin Meyer's culture map, and we are both big fans of it because it's simple. It's complex also because it has 8 steps, but it's so easy. It's so simple to relate to. And in the business and organizational context, it just puts the finger on the pulse. It's not just a fluffy discussion with intangibles. There are really clear dimensions that she talks about that can help us understand where those differences, the not always positive emotions, are coming up. So that's why I'd like to also talk about these 8 dimensions, but instead of telling you a lexical definition, I would suggest you tell us a little bit about that situation with these stakeholders, clients of yours, and I will ask you a couple of guiding questions to go deeper into what actually happened.
Yeah. So the project was all about moving the customers in Israel, and they are working with Microsoft, and they wanted to move their entire teams to Google Workspace. So it was really a technology migration project. In regards to technology, that's just an easy way, like it's just, take data and you move data. But the real challenge was really getting high adoption on the customer's end. So we just blindly started, with our usual, we have a methodology that we put in place. So we started our usual change management kickoff and then onboarding sponsors. And then we started to hit a couple of bumps. One of the bumps that we started having was in regards to our communications. We started getting feedback about our communications not resonating with people the way that we generally do communications, that they're very detailed. We do go quite in depth into what's happening and how things are going to change for them, and they're very repetitive as well. Each communication kind of builds on the other. And so, that didn't fly.
That didn't fly. What was your initial communication focusing on?
It was focusing on what was going to change and how things were going to change for people. And in every communication, we kind of referred to the previous one and did a recap. Because it is going to change the way you work, right? If you're moving from Microsoft to Google. But we did see that our communications were, first of all, quite long, a bit too detailed for the audience, and it wasn't resonating.
Very, very interesting. Now, when we are at an initial phase of any change project, I always invite people to refrain from talking about the how. You mentioned that you focused on the what is changing from Microsoft to Google Solutions, but talking about how is only good when people are already in the exploration phase of their emotional cycle of change. When they are still in denial and resistance, I would say focus on the why. So if, for example, your client, your stakeholders were very happy with the Microsoft solutions, moving to Google solutions might have been like, why fix something that is not broken? So that would be my little invitation for you and your team to say, were people triggered in terms of their interest to take on board something very different? Another thing about Israel is that according to Erin Meyer's scales of communication, there is low context and high context communication. And Israel is fairly on the high context side, which means it's not just talking about what we want to talk about, but also reading between the lines. So I believe that just allowing people a little bit less repetition and finding out what is it that they take might have been useful in that sense, to consider that unlike many Northern Western European cultures from which we are coming from, they want to really read between the lines and read the air, as often we say.
Exactly. We had to adapt the way that we did our communications. Thankfully, our customer was very graceful in a way and kind of really helped us they showed us what they wanted as communication. So they coached us.
Exactly. And it's absolutely fair. I mean, I've worked in many, many cultures like yourself, and I still don't get it right, all of them, but there are some preventive actions that we can take to help us prevent these differences. You mentioned that the employees in that organizations were not resonating with it. That was the wording you used. How did they give you the feedback that, hey, stop, hold your horses, we just don't like this?
Yeah, our sponsor was very clear. Our sponsor was very clear with giving us that feedback. So that is also what helped us to deviate and to adapt. But our sponsor did not hold the words back. So he was very direct in providing us with feedback and telling us what he wanted, basically.
Exactly. I guess with Israelis, as per their cultural profile, and it doesn't necessarily refer to every single Israeli colleague, stakeholders, but generally speaking, based on Erin Meyer's model, they are on the extreme end of direct negative feedback, which means that if we prepare to work with them, we need to prepare ourselves that they are going to call a spade, as often we hear. So they're going to tell it to us, a little bit like the Dutch people, who are so famous for being very straightforward with any good or not so good feedback. And that's something that's worth considering when we are preparing to launch a pilot, when we prepare to launch a change initiative. To give you another extreme, when I worked in Malaysia in an initiative, they are the total opposites. You need to package the feedback in a way that they are receiving it, but as a friendly advice. And very likely people from that part of the world, and especially that country, they would not tell you upright what is wrong, what they like, what they dislike. You need to build a bit of the relationship before.
Exactly. The relationship was important. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Apologies. So you mentioned that the leader was really straightforward with you. How did you feel that he or she was managing within the organization that lack of resonance with the change project?
How was he managing? I don't think he was really managing, to be honest. He came to us with a problem and he was just like, here, fix it. You need to find a way to fix it. So that was really interesting. And we in regards to another issue that we had in regards to training, we have a specific like training plan in place. And we wanted to take them on our training journey that we usually do with, Q&A sessions and support sessions, really like holding hands. He didn't want to follow our advice, which was quite curious. He just wanted like one training, that's it. People don't need more. And we were explaining like, no, we have quite a bit of experience in this area. People do need holding hands and helping them through their, adoption journey. And he he did not want to take our advice. So they needed to go through a certain amount of pain and feel the pain themselves. And after that, he did come back saying, okay, actually, we do need a few more training sessions. We do need to go through a little bit more support. So thankfully, after that, he agreed, but it did take a bit of time.
Well, I encourage everyone in the audience to actually check Erin Meyer's website and the culture map, because in preparation for our discussion, I downloaded her report on Ireland and Israel. And what you said absolutely makes sense. When it comes to Israel's culture, they are typically egalitarian, which means they are not going to come and say, you have to do this based on her findings. And also when it comes to deciding, they are somewhere in between when it comes to top-down versus consensual. What does it mean? That exactly this behavior that you observed is absolutely normal. It fits their general cultural profile. It means that if there are issues like the lack of resonance with the why we should be changing to a new system, you should not be expecting an active and visible executive sponsor just to say, I want this. They want us as change consultants and supporting people to help them find a way to bring people on board and be a bit more consensual than that. So that's definitely something for us to as well to remember. Well, this must have been quite an emotionally interesting experience for you as the consultant, but also for your clients. Tell me a little bit about how you built trust with them.
So it was quite a challenge because we didn't get to meet face to face. It was all a fully remote project. So me and my team were based in Belgium. And so we wanted to fly over to Tel Aviv, but that just didn't work out. So I could definitely see that there was a gap. There's only so much emotional connection you can do virtually. So I do think that this, the human connection kind of failed a bit. And I really wish that we could have had some budget to go on site. So moments where, that relationship would have really been useful, we didn't get those moments just because it was just virtual, we always try to connect with our customers, even remote, but it was tricky.
And that's especially interesting in the post-pandemic world, where we have learned that we can manage relationships virtually, but it's still not the same. The face-to-face connections have a special value to it. I'm a big fan of managing hybrid relations, but with certain cultures, what makes the difference is whether people trust you based on the relationships. And several cultures within, let's say, the Middle Eastern region, they actually favorize the opportunity to build relationship. If they know who you are, if they trust you, if you get along well, then even if there is resistance and there are challenges, they will give you that trust to help you course correct. And something that's also very interesting to know is that there are cultures where people just confront you.
Yeah.
And Israel, based on the cultural profile from Erin Meyer, is rather the one who will just tell you that we don't like it, negative direct feedback, but also that we disagree with you. And that's something that we need to remember not to take personally. It's just the cultural DNA of the people from such cultures.
Yeah.
You had the implementation of this change project on your agenda. How did you prepare to bring that agenda to the organization in Israel?
We had a series of workshops with the customer to agree on the roadmap. You always have to adapt your approach to the company culture and then the local culture and the people. So we did a series of workshops. Now, one thing that we saw that we struggled is that we put together a plan together, really like in a cooperative way. We put a plan together, but then the execution, we were a little bit more tied to scheduling and dates and timings than our Israeli friends. And that was extremely frustrating. I can tell you that. We had multiple moments where we had to breathe through before joining a call because communications were not sent in the timing that we had agreed upon, much more relaxed than us here. We saw that our customer was just not as vigorous in respecting deadlines as we were. And that did cause frustration and friction, where we had to keep reminding the customer, hey, why don't you send the communication right now, like we agreed upon together, That was tricky, Margaret. That was tricky.
Why do you think they were so not lenient when it came to timings?
I don't know. I think they have just a different view on time. We like to anticipate things a lot. We want people to be aware early on, give people time to digest the information. It didn't seem to be the case. I don't know if it's a local culture thing or if it's a general Israeli culture thing.
Well, I can't answer because I'm not an expert on Israeli culture, but something that is worth considering is the history and how it has influenced the way we relate to scheduling. So it's an interesting information. For example, after the Second World War, a lot of countries, let's say like Germany, the way for them to rebuild their economy, their country, was for everyone to be on the dot in a certain location, like in a factory. And that somehow is ingrained in cultures like that of Germany. And there are also countries where being flexible because of the unexpected natural disasters, unfortunately, is again ingrained in their culture.
Makes sense.
Influences it. I wouldn't say Israel is an extreme on the flexible scheduling side, but definitely it's an environment where things need to be in a way fluid. They can't be to the dot because of the environment in which they operate. And again, working from Belgium, where things again are fairly planned in terms of agenda, it is our responsibility to prepare for the difference that they will not see the clock in the same way as we do. And it's fascinating how history influences our behaviors and cultural preferences still today.
That makes so much sense. Yeah.
Now, one more question, which is about how did you convince the leader of this company to take another angle, to take another perspective on the situation that you were facing?
I think it took time. That's how we kind of persuaded him as we were building on our culture, on our trust, sorry, as we were building trust together. Then he, slowly kind of gave us more room and gave us more, space. I think that's how it happened. Now, at one point, we could see that our sponsor was not making decisions as quickly and as thorough in the way that we thought he would. So even at one point, we were even discussing internally, like, are we talking to the right person? Is this person the decision maker? But in the end, it turned out that we were talking to the right person. We had the right person in our project SteerCo. But yeah, decision making just took a little bit of time, and it wasn't as straightforward as if I'm working with someone from Sweden or from Germany, where you know who the decision maker is and that decision person will make that decision. It just wasn't as clear cut.
And I can relate to that. So Israel, as we mentioned before, it's not really a top-down culture. They do like consensus, which means you probably don't have just one person who's influencing the way forward. You need to involve more people and look at how you can build a consensus for what is to come. When it comes to convincing or persuading, food for thought for any of us who are leading change is to see whether in a certain culture people appreciate hypotheses, theories, principles, or they appreciate the good practices, bad practices, the application side. Now, again, I would just name one culture. Germany pops in my head, but also my original country, Hungary, also is fairly high on the hypothesis focus, on the principle first, which means that even in school, we were taught to know what's the logic, the theory behind something and argue with that. But then there are cultures like the US, for example, and even Israel, where they just say, let's get into it, just do it. Tell us, did it work? And let's cut all the theories, all the hypotheses. We're not interested in that one. It's worth looking at your preference and your team's preferences, given your cultural profile, and see whether you prepare yourself to argue in favor of the initiative in a way that people in Israel want to hear you argue. And again, that's probably the last that I would like to highlight from Erin Meyer's model. if anyone is interested about to find out more about the model, I would warmly recommend them to check out on Google her website and the cultural profiles, because one of the beautiful things is that it's very practical, very doable, and she gives hands-on suggestions based on the differences people have. Another very fun activity to do, I often do it with my clients, is I invite them to check out her HBR, Harvard Business Review article, because linked to that, one of those, she has a cultural self-assessment. And I find it really fun because before you get into understanding the 8 dimensions, you answer some of her questions, and she will tell you how, let's say myself, how Hungarian I am, having lived and worked in many countries over the last 20 years. Is the same for you, Karen. Our nationality doesn't really define how we behave, because the impulses from the other cultures influence us. Some we will agree with, we really on board, some we just ignore.
Yeah.
And once you know where you are on the scale and you prepare to work with, let's say, Israel, you look at her research on what is typically the Israeli profile. And again, it's average, so it doesn't mean every Israeli fits that profile. You can see where the differences are. And that's something I pragmatically do before I engage in regional or global projects where I might not be familiar with the cultures that will be included.
That's such a good piece of advice. Definitely, we need to incorporate that in our methodology as well. It will just avoid you losing time and just getting your change management roadmap right from the start.
Exactly.
Thank you, Margaret. I think that was really insightful also for me. It was really good to hear your perspective on things, and also applying Erin Meyer's culture map model to a specific real life use case. So thanks. Anything else you would like to add before we close and wrap up our podcast of today?
I guess as we navigate this cultural landscape in which we operate today, I think it's good to know what resources are out there. We talked about Erin Meyer extensively. I would say also, for example, Hofstede has a website called Cultural Insights that is freely available and around different dimensions, but can help us for those differences. I invite listeners to check out TED Talks about cultural intelligence, because some of those, without naming just one or two, are really inviting us to take a micro action to get better at understanding the differences. I would also say, if we end up working with a country and the culture that we are not yet familiar with, we need to reach out to our network, to people who have worked with them, because that firsthand experience can simplify the mess that we might be facing. And last but not least, a lot of countries on their Ministry of Foreign Trade or Chamber of Commerce websites, they have very nice descriptions of business etiquette in their countries. Now, these activities are just some practical steps we can do to prepare well, proactively, for the cultural differences as we want to lead change. And I trust they are not taking too long, but they will give us a much stronger confidence in managing the differences.
That's really good. Thank you. I will try to link all of the elements that you've mentioned in the description box for you guys as well, to help you in your preparation and your change management journey. Thank you, Margaret, again for your time, for your insights and sharing your wisdom. I think this was a really insightful session, and it was for me in any case. So, guys, thanks for listening and sticking with us, and we'll be back with a new episode very soon. Thanks, Margaret. See you.
Thank you very much.